What's up, everybody? Brian Maxwell checking in, training here at the Nissan store and at the VW store, which is across the parking lot. Now, if you are an automotive sales consultant and you're utilizing the CRM and you're reaching out to people and you may be having some challenges, a couple of things that you really may want to consider. Number one, when reaching out to your prospects out of the CRM, whether they have already been into the dealership, whether they came in via internet, over the phone, referral, or whatnot, what methods are you using to reach out to these folks over the phone? And email, for that matter. All of them should be treated as cold if you have not established some type of rapport with this person. If it's a referral from someone you've never met, if it's a phone call lead, an internet lead, or even a person that came in that only was there for a few minutes, you want to think of them all as cold. Now, typically, most salespeople make a phone call and they say this: "Hey, may I speak to John?" "Yeah, this is John." "Hey, John, this is Brian over at ABC dealership. And John, the reason why I'm calling because you came into the dealership and you looked at our 2017 and blah, blah, blah. And I wanted to ask you if you'd be interested in coming back in and checking." Right after they say their name and that dealership name, that prospect is totally putting their defenses up and they're looking for the quickest way to get off of that phone. What you want to research is a term. You want to search for this on Google. It's a term called pattern interrupt. And what that means is that when you engage with your prospect or with your customer, you're doing so in a manner that is totally foreign to what they would expect your typical salesperson, automotive sales consultant to reach out to them and say, which is what I just experienced. A more effective way that has worked for me and for thousands of automotive sales consultants and salespeople, period, that I've trained across the country is that when reaching out, making sure that you keep it tight, you keep the questions coming in, and you want to make sure that you really come across as somebody that's looking to explore or find out more information rather than trying to do a 30-second infomercial and sell them a product. So a way to use pattern interrupts when you're contacting a prospect would be something like this. Ring, ring. "Hey, I speak to John." "This is John." "John, Brian Maxwell. John, I'm looking for a little bit of help. Let me explain the reason for my call, John. Put some purpose to it, and then you and I can decide if it makes sense for us to communicate or to speak any further. Will that work for you?" Now, what you've done, you've called, you introduced yourself. You also asked for help. And one thing you'll realize in the psychology of selling is that human beings, we are far more likely to help somebody than we are to just give somebody something. Even though helping is giving of your time, but one, that is so foreign. That is not how your typical salesperson calling, asking for help. No, they want to bombard and they want to just sell, close. Okay, so you called and you told, "Hey, listen, I'm looking for a little bit of help." Then let me explain the reason for my call, to put a little purpose or to put a little context to it. Then you and I can decide if it makes sense for us to speak any further. Now, when you put the ball in the prospect or in the customer's court, you say, then you and I can decide if it makes sense for us to speak further. That is what you call getting an upfront contract. That is where you are putting yourself and that prospect together to make a decision. And what you'll find is by using that type of a greeting, you can expect, even if you have horrible voice inflection, because tonality is very important. A lot of salespeople like to call and they want to elevate their voice inflection. "Hey, John, Brian, hope you're having a great morning." That has sales all over it. Salesy. But you want to interact with people on a level of an expert. So, "Hey, John, Brian Maxwell. John, I'm looking for a little bit of help. And let me explain the reason for my call, to put a little context to it. Then you and I can decide if it makes sense for us to even speak further. Is that cool with you?" Okay. You told them, "Hey, listen, let me explain the reason." You got an upfront contract, and then you finished it up with the question. Now they say, "Yeah, okay." Now you want to get into talking about their intent. "Well, John, recently you were in looking at a 2017 XYZ. And John, typically when people come in and they look at the XYZ, they have one of three concerns. And then you want to go into whatever your three most common concerns typically are. Typically, they're coming in because they have a good vehicle, it's getting them from point A to point B, but they're missing out on the features that are coming on the newer models and they want to take advantage of the latest technology. Or number two, they're coming in because they've got a vehicle that's getting them around safely. It's got features, but the gas mileage is not as good as they want it to be. Or number three, they've got a vehicle with the features, it's getting them around safely. Gas mileage is fine, but they're looking for something that's more affordable, which will allow them to invest a little bit more money into their household. Now, which one of those three is affecting you enough where you'd be willing to give another 3 to 5 minutes to speak with me? Now, you might say that there's no way that I would ever respond to something like that, but I want to tell you, don't knock it before you tried it, because I'd say 98% of salespeople out there believe that they still have to use the same sales tactics that were used 20 and 30 years ago. And I want you to take this into consideration when you're looking at different methods to go about either making prospecting calls or selling, period. A lot of the old formulas and things, they're good. They were effective, and some of them still are relevant today. But a lot of those things that were written in the 90s and the early 2000s, even in the 80s, they were all created before the internet explosion, before social media, before the millennial onslaught. So you have to factor those things in. And especially if you're selling vehicles, listen, everybody was able to make $100,000 back in the 80s and 90s before there was any internet to compare anything to. Long before there was Google reviews, before there was social media, before there was TrueCar and Edmunds and whatever else, Kelly Blue Books, all of these things that make it to where now it's a lot more competitive and you have to be far more skilled. So when you're reaching out to make a contact with somebody and you hear the traditional person saying, hey, this is such from ABC dealership and I'm calling to touch base with you and see if this is a good time to talk. When do you think it's ever a good time for a salesperson to call a prospect and interrupt their day? Do you believe anybody wakes up and says, you know what, I really look forward to all the salespeople that can call and talk to me. I really want to talk to salespeople today. You yourself probably avoid sales calls like the plague, which is why if you call with your typical sales call, you'll get typical sales results, which is about a 1% either positive response rate or a follow-up. But if you call and say, hey, John, this is Brian, and John, I'm looking for a little bit of help. Let me explain the reason for my call, to put a little purpose behind it. Then you and I can decide if it makes sense for us to speak any further. Is that cool with you? Try it. See what happens, whether you're in BDC or if you're a sales rep on the floor. Just check it out. And you may say, that would never work on me. Well, it's a good thing I'm not selling to you, but guess what? It works. And a lot of people are using it to increase their amount of appointments. And remember, the purpose of this call is not to close a sale, it's to schedule an appointment. If you're a member of the channel, make sure you join the movement. I'm Brian Maxwell. Oh, and by the way, make sure that you click the link in the description, because right now, for a limited time, what I have, every single thing that I share with you, if you've been looking for training, if you've been looking for ways to leverage social media to drive business, if you've been looking for ways to close more deals at your dealership, lucky thing for you is you're watching this video, because the link that's in the description and the link that's in the comment section will take you over to where there is hours and hours, over 10 hours of audio and video on how to take a person from your greeting all the way to where you're getting that paperwork signed and you're programming their phone into the vehicle for them to go home. You also have access to the total complete program of how to, the step-by-step guide on how to leverage Facebook to really find and start driving people in your area who are looking for the product you offer. Folks, this is real.